Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Covered off all the housekeeping items for those of you who are tuning in on a recording. So, our agenda today, we've had our announcements. We are soon going to hand over to Michael Kolodner, who is our very special guest, who is going to talk about designing for user success. I saw this presentation at TDX last year. Fantastic presentation. I think you're all going to love it, I hope. Um, Once Michael's finished, he's got about half an hour. So Michael's going to do his presentation. You can then ask him questions. We're then going to move into a session on generative AI. We only have 35 minutes for that. That's going to be interesting because I've no idea actually how long it's going to take me to talk about that, but we can jump in and out and talk about stuff as we go along. Debbie's going to help with that too. And then at 3:45, we're going to jump into our duck race and hopefully people are going to win some swag. So, without further ado, I am going to hand over to Michael.
Thank you, Emma. Let me make sure that I get the screen share and the right windows and all that stuff going. Let's see, I'm going to do this, and then should be this. You are now all seeing my slide, I hope. Nods? Awesome. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Kolodner. Thank you, Emma, for the quick introduction. I will do a little more, and we'll go through the presentation. We'll do questions at the end. If you have a burning question in the middle, it's okay to interrupt me, but I'm not going to be watching the Zoom chat or the faces, so I won't notice unless you literally break in with audio. I am an independent Salesforce consultant. I work with nonprofits, exclusively with nonprofits, mostly doing program management on the platform, although, of course, you can't work with nonprofits and not touch fundraising as well. I'm a member of the Salesforce MVP Hall of Fame. I have some certifications, and something you might not know about me if you've met me before is that I'm an amateur photographer. And so I'm going to use some of my photography to illustrate today's presentation. Apparently the arrow keys aren't going to work for me, so I'm going to have to click. Okay, since we're going on a journey together today, thought I'd start with this image. I'm going to start with my Trailblazer journey by way of introduction. You may be surprised to learn that I did not set out in my career to be a Salesforce admin. I actually was going to be a diplomat. I would join the Foreign Service. I was going to solve the Middle East peace crisis. Unfortunately, that career didn't continue, and look how that turned out for them. After my Foreign Service career crashed and burned, I spent about 10 years as a full-time stay-at-home dad. And then in my first job back in the work world, we needed a CRM. I hadn't heard the term CRM, but I had been working with databases. They'd kind of stalked me throughout my career and my volunteer activities. And so I was given the task of deciding among the CRM options. I found this Salesforce thing. It seemed like a good option for us because it was free. And so we adopted it. I found that I had finally found a database that I could bend to my will, that I could make do what I wanted. I could automate things that had a good user experience. I also fell in love with the Trailblazer community and the Power of Us hub. I started asking tons of questions. Eventually, I had asked enough questions that I could start answering some questions. And a few years later, I decided I wanted to do Salesforce full time. I found a full-time job as a solo admin at a medium-sized nonprofit. I had the opportunity to start attending some events, including open source sprints. I guess at the time they were called, I don't remember what they were called. Now they're called Commons Community Sprints. I guess then they were open source sprints. I made friends in the ecosystem like Emma, started going to more events, sharing my knowledge. At the beginning of COVID, I was laid off from that job. And so I took my side gig doing a little bit of consulting, put it in the front, and have been doing it full time ever since. Some of you may know my alter ego, where I'm the Free Like a Puppy guy. So I write a blog about Salesforce in the nonprofit context called Free Like a Puppy. It's at freelikeapuppy.tech. I hope some of you are subscribers. I hope more of you will become subscribers after this. please, like and share. And if you see me at London's Calling, I will have stickers with me from the wonderful artwork that my artist does for Freebie the puppy. So please find me and get some stickers. Continuing with the animal theme for a moment. This was our first flock of chickens. We have chickens in our backyard. This was our first flock from the left. That's Willow, Buffy, Gandalf, and Sauron. None of them are with us any longer, but we have a new flock of 8 chickens running around my side yard right now. Okay, let's get into it. We are here to talk about design for user success, how to build better Lightning record pages for your users. The goal, both our goal today, but your goal as Salesforce admins, is to make Salesforce more intuitive so your users are more productive. Hopefully, your users can also have fun, and today I hope we're going to have fun. I think bubbles are fun. We're going to do today's presentation in 3 parts. We just have a short time together, so we're going to break it up. We're going to talk about the principles of composition. We're going to do a show and tell. I'm going to show you some real pages from my real client orgs, and then I'm going to talk about how I built it. And I'm going to promise you first that you do not need to worry about taking notes. This slide, bigger, will show up later. You don't need to grab it yet, but the QR code and the URL itself will be available at the end. Anything I mention, you will have really good instructions on. You don't have to take notes because we're going to go fast. So we're going to start with the principles of composition. The principles of composition are how we analyze a piece of art, in this case, visual art. Of course, art exists for its own sake. Design is art with a purpose. So when we are working with designing our Salesforce pages, we're taking the principles of art and we're applying it for a useful purpose. When analyzing a piece of visual art, there are usually 7 elements that we take into consideration. So let's go through them because the medium of your Salesforce page is a visual medium or a visual piece of composition or design. The first one everyone talks about, probably the most important, ironically enough, is emphasis. That is to say, what about the piece of art is important to the viewer, to the artist, to the taking of the meaning? And we talk about balance. So not necessarily is the page symmetrical, but are elements of equal importance in balance with each other. Although we're also going to talk about symmetry. Contrast, which usually refers to color and brightness. And in this case, we're going to let the Salesforce Lightning Design System pretty much handle that for us, which is really convenient. There are times when you're going to be in control of some color and brightness things, and so I want you to just keep in mind that it's important how you think about it. Repetition. So reusing design elements in your composition will help your users stay oriented, will help your Salesforce, will help your viewers stay oriented to your composition, will help your Salesforce users stay oriented as they move throughout your org. Proportion, again, something that the Salesforce Lightning Design System is going to take care of for us for the most part, but the relative sizes of things like headers and body text, etc., that kind of proportion is something we want to think about. Movement, we're going to spend a lot of time on this. Movement in this case, for any visual art medium, it means eye movement. So how does your eye move throughout the composition? We're going to see this time and again. And last but not least is the white space, the places where your users' eyes can rest. In terms of Salesforce, we need to think about making our pages information rich or information dense, but not overwhelming so that our users don't get fatigued. 7 elements of design and composition that we're going to think about as we analyze Salesforce pages. So let's analyze some photographs first. I would argue there's a lot of movement in this photograph. I don't think I get too much dissent on that one. But I would also argue there's repetition, right? In those converging lines, that's repetition that conveys the movement. And emphasis as your eye is drawn to the center of the arch so that you see what I want you to see in this photograph. Let's contrast that with this photograph that has a lot more white space. Your eyes can rest a little bit. But I would also note there's repetition in the bridge stays. There's contrast and balance in the color of the Golden Gate Bridge and the sky. I think there's movement as you're drawn along the bridge. I could go on, but I'm not going to. I'm going to do one more photograph. Now here, I'm pretty sure I know that your eyes went straight to the center of the frame, to the eyes in the middle, because we are humans, and humans have evolved to look at faces. So you are finding the face of that dancer in the middle, in particular his eyes, and then your eyes are going to start taking in the rest of the photograph, and they are going to spiral to the right and outwards, guided by those canes. They're going to hit the edges of the photograph and then come back to the middle and start exploring again. And so that gives some repetition to how your eye moves. Of course, the canes bring some repetition, and all of this helps you to take in the photograph and understand it. All right, so now let's look at some page layouts and apply those same kinds of analysis that we just did. So we'll start here. This is a typical page of mine. Obviously, it's a contact page, but I will just tell you my other object pages look pretty similar. And by pretty similar, I mean almost the same. So even though I'm going to show you basically a lot of contact pages, if you were seeing account pages, if you were seeing some custom object page, it's going to work the same way. I'm using contact pages because in most cases, they're the richest, because particularly in most nonprofit contexts, everything kind of hangs off the contact, the person, the constituent. So there's a lot going on the contact page to work with. The fact that my pages are so similar across objects is intentional. That's repetition in my design vocabulary. It means my users know that every page is going to work the same and they know how to find what they need, even when they go somewhere new or somewhere they don't spend a lot of time. I promise you everything I'm showing you is dummy data. I am showing you real pages from production orgs, not sandboxes. I do keep test data in production, and I'm going to show you records from that test data. All right, let's start with eye movement. This is how users' eyes move across the page. We know this because Salesforce is web pages, and this is how users' eyes move across web pages. Of course, they start in the upper left, they skim down to the right. Why do they go left to right? Well, because we are speaking a left to right written language. I suppose I would have to flip this if I was doing this presentation in Hebrew or Arabic, but we're going to stick with left to right for now. So your eyes start at the upper left, they skim down, they hit the bottom of the window where they're constrained, they bounce up and they skim the right-hand side, and then they work their way back and they start again. In the course of that, they've taken in a couple of things. First of all, it's a Salesforce page, so they didn't have to look at the tabs across the top because they spend so much time here, they know what they are. You didn't have to look at the tabs at the top because you know where we are. They quickly have taken in that the details are on the left and there's some related lists on the right. They'll come back to those in a minute to figure out what the heck they are. As they skim past, they might notice the related list quick links. Then they notice the tab element, tab component on the left-hand side, and that's where they're going to be able to find more things. And they're ready, they're oriented and ready to go. Now, I also want you to think about the fact that I have balance in this page layout. I am not using the standard Lightning record page template, which is the 2/3, 1/3, or wide on the left, narrow on the right layout. By the way, I hate that layout, and I switch all of my record pages to the 50/50 template that you're seeing here. We'll look at it later, but that's called header and 2 equal regions, but I'm going to call it the 50/50 split. There's other repetition going on this page. You don't know it yet because you've only seen one page, but I'm going to tell you right now a lot of things that you will always see in one of my orgs. First of all, the two arrows, the upper left and the bottom right. There are two tab components on my page here. I always, no exceptions, always load to the leftmost tab. So if I'm going to have a tab component, it loads to the leftmost tab. That tab should be the one most commonly used, which pretty much makes it the most important. And I will move it to the leftmost if I decide it's going to be the one it should load to. Salesforce doesn't do this by default, and I disagree with them. And I've spoken to their chief designer about it. If you think the related lists are the most important thing and a page should load to them, they should be the leftmost tab. It shouldn't load to the right. I find that super confusing. Okay, well, I'll talk more about that later. I also try to place the same kind of field in the same place. That's less consistent for me, partly because it's really hard to put a whole lot of groupings of same kinds of fields. But one example of this is a status or stage or something like that pick list. Pretty much I will always put in the right-hand column of the topmost section and towards the top. It's not necessarily at the top because things like an auto-named field or a record type or something sometimes might go above it, but pretty much if you're looking for the status or stage of something, you're going to know to look in the upper right of the details component. That's a principle I think that I didn't really develop as a quote principle from first principles, but because in the default Salesforce org in Classic, the opportunity stage pick list is in the upper right of the page layout. And I sort of stuck with that convention over the years. Notice also that I'm trying really hard to use screen real estate effectively. Most importantly, vertical screen real estate. It's the one we have the least of. I also have a little bit of PTSD from my first Salesforce job, where I and all my colleagues had 11-inch MacBook Airs, if you remember those. Their screens were about this tall. So vertical screen real estate was a major premium. I don't want to waste it, and I don't want to make you scroll. So I'm not going to waste screen real estate, even today when we have bigger screens, but they're mostly bigger in the horizontal direction. How do I do that use of screen real estate? Well, first of all, notice in the upper right there, I have a related list quick links component, but I've hidden the unneeded and useless header that says related list quick links. I don't know what that conveys to the users that they won't figure out on their own, so I hide it. It's a little checkbox, turn it off. I do other things to reduce scrolling, which we're going to look at in a second. For example, I have a lot of tabs in this page layout. Those tabs reduce scrolling. If you need to find information related to advisory, you know you don't have to scroll looking for the right fields. You just click on the advisory tab and you will see the fields you need about advisory. Same with internships or earnings. So I'm taking them off the page layout and I'm putting them in a thematic tab, which reduces scrolling, therefore saving vertical screen real estate. I really appreciate that none of you broke in to say, but Michael, there's no white space on this page. You are not wrong. There is not a lot of white space on this page. That is intentional in this case, because I wanted to make this page information dense. This is the contact dashboard, if you will. You go to one of these pages to learn everything you need to know about a student in the Academy Group's program. I'm packing it in as much as I can, and white spaces for later. We'll get there. All right, last note. For all that this page is pretty custom, I would argue that it's also pretty familiar. I mean, everyone on this call is a Salesforce expert. It's going to be familiar to you. But even your newest user, if they spend 5 minutes with this page and then you send them to Trailhead and they log in and they create a trailhead playground and they open it up and it's the default page layouts, which are terrible, they're still going to be able to pretty much find their way around. They're not going to be completely thrown by the fact that my layout is super custom and Trailhead Playgrounds are totally different. They're close enough, and therefore nobody's going to get lost. Okay, let's click into the earnings tab. Click. Now, the page changes. We've got a tab. It loads. We gain some white space. The white space helps us because behind the tab, everything's thematic and our eye is drawn, emphasis, our eye is drawn to the information behind that tab where we have some roll-up summary fields at the top, and below that, a single related list that's the relevant related list for what's going on in this tab. Now let's click into one of those financial contribution records that we were learning about on the tab. Click. Okay, now we're off the contact page. We've loaded to a very simple object. The financial contribution object in this case has, I don't know, what's that, like 10 fields, probably fewer than 10 fields. So first of all, we are already focusing on a lot less here than we were on the contact page. And one way of focusing is the fact that there's no tab component on the left. This is a detail component directly on the canvas. I don't need a tab component. There's nothing else to find here. I have a single related list. It is going to be probably important, right? You might need to upload some files relating to financial information. So I've made it easy to find. It's on the related tab, which is on the right, in the tab set on the right. It is the tab that loaded first because it's the leftmost tab. So it's really easy to find those files. By the way, I always put chatter on the right, usually as its own tab, unless there's no other tabs, in which case it goes right on the canvas. Why do I put it on the right? I like it on the right so that in its own tab set, so that you can be composing a chatter message while still seeing the details component on the left. So that if you're saying, hey, colleague, should King T'Challa have gotten $250? Shouldn't it have been $299? You can look and refer like, wait, is 250 the number that you don't have to like switch around while you're writing your chatter post. I think chatter's super powerful. I know they want to kill it in favor of Slack. I'm not pro. Anyway, moving on. There's some other things on this page. There's some color here. I'm sure you all noticed the big yellow banner. We'll talk about that in a sec, but there's color which draws the eye, which brings focus. There's also an emoji on the button, which also draws the eye and brings focus. It tells you what you need to do if you're on this record and it is not dispersed. You're probably here as the financial person for the organization. And what are you going to do? You're going to click enter disbursement. And when you click it, you tap, 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 you enter your disbursement. Now the money's gone out the door. The banner turns green. Life is good. We're finished with this record. We can move to the next thing in our job. All of that is to say, your pages do not need to be boring. Here's another contact page from another org. We've got color. We've got emojis. We've got fields moved around the page so that you can do all the things quickly, efficiently. You know what you need to do. Your eye is drawn to the right place to get it done. Okay, not boring, I hope, but a little bit of white space for an eye rest. This is a hilltop village in Yemen. And let's talk about how I built these things. First of all, I have done nothing fancy here. This is a short session. I'm focusing only on Lightning record pages known as flexi pages. These same principles will apply anywhere else you are building or designing. That could be flows, that could be other systems, whatever, but we're going to stick today to Lightning record pages and things you can do straight out of the box, or I will have one exception, nearly out of the box, third-party components. So this is everything you do when you click edit page under the gear. First, I mentioned this. We've changed the page template. So please stop using the default templates. You're going to click on the template editor. You're going to click change, and you're going to select, I recommend the header and 2 equal regions, which gives you the 50-50 split. There are arguments for when some of those other templates can be useful. However, I pretty much only ever use the header and 2 equal regions because I also want consistency. And so I'm just going to stick with the 50-50 in all cases rather than one page where it's 2/3, 1/3, one page where it's the 3 in a row, one page where it's blah, blah. I think it will drive my users nuts. So 50-50 split all the way. By the way, the biggest benefit to the 50-50 split is that related lists in a small section, in the 2-to-1, for example, they display as cards. Cards are not lists. I guess that would make them related piles of cards. That's not a thing. Lists are so much more functional. You can get multiple columns in. You can compare records to each other by glancing across the columns. When it's in the card view, you get like 2 or 3 cards at most, and you don't really know what you're looking at. So I am a big fan of the 50-50 split, if only for the related lists displaying as lists benefit. Okay, next, pay attention to how I've used field placement on this page. As I said before, I moved a lot of things behind tabs. When I moved behind tab, I've taken it off the page layout, the general page layout, and I've put it behind the tab to save room. I also, on the right-hand side here, have some more fields. These are important roll-up summary fields that are like the quick glance of how this participant is doing in the program. It's on the right-hand side because your eyes skim and bounce and end up there and get a little bit of the focus. The emoji, of course, keeps your eye there as well. So I'm intentionally placing fields in the places where the eye is going to be caught by them if they're the important fields. And now it's time for a quick tangent. I am not using dynamic forms. You may use dynamic forms if you want to. I am not telling you one way or the other. I'm just going to tell you why I'm not using them, at least not yet. First, and the biggest for me, is that I'm kind of afraid I'm going to lose track of fields. So on a dynamic form editor, you can pull each field individually onto the page, but there's no indicator on the field picker on the left which field you've already placed on the page. Plus, since you can dynamically hide and show fields, even if there were, I don't know how they would indicate when it shows and when it doesn't. I'm afraid I'm going to lose fields is what it comes down to. They've now added when you build a new field, you can elect to have it added to dynamic forms pages, but I'm still afraid I'm going to lose fields. That's one thing. Or I might add them unintentionally more than once with the wrong conditional displays, etc. I still think you don't have a blank space option, but it is coming. But I make use of blank spaces on page layouts all the time to line fields up and push them down and do other things. I didn't love that. And even if you go to dynamic forms, the classic page layout still controls list view and report editability. And so why maintain 2 things if I can do everything I need without dynamic forms? I'm just going to use what's called the related record hack. I will give you a link in the resources, but on the right-hand side is the related record hack where I've put fields where I want them, and on the left-hand side is a dynamic forms component. You may make a different choice. Last thing, the real reason that's keeping me from dynamic forms, I work in multiple orgs. I'm a consultant. If I go to dynamic forms in one org and not in the other org, I'm going to just be completely lost when I'm trying to figure out why a field is one place or another. If you in your single org can switch to dynamic forms entirely or just can keep track of which objects you have switched over, you're golden. I just don't have that ability. I would really want to do it in all my clients at once, and I just haven't done so yet. So enough for my little tangent. We'll take a little breather to cleanse the palate, and we will come back. possibly the most powerful feature of Lightning is the Lightning page design option of conditional display. Part of what makes dynamic forms so cool is you can do conditional display of individual forms. But with conditional display, I can conditionally display related record hacks to show and hide a chunk of fields. I can conditionally display whole tabs or tab sets. And in the upper right there of the page layout, you see all those colored banners. Those are conditionally displayed. All I did on that financial contribution object to go from a yellow banner to a green is yellow is conditionally displayed for one stage and green is conditionally displayed for the other, but it's kind of magical what it does to the page layout. Of course, tabs and accordions you've seen and I've discussed quite a bit how I use tabs on my page layouts. Accordions are also pretty fun. I don't use them enough, probably. It's kind of neat how they open and close vertically. They do kind of present a very different design challenge, and I sometimes can't decide how I feel about them. But I do have, this is a real org, I do have one client that likes them and uses them. Plus, you may have noticed here, you can put emoji in your tab or accordion tab labels, and those are always fun. Screen flows. Screen flows are not just for taking action. They can be a page design element. So this screen flow is pretty much like you'd expect it to be. You use it to do something on the page. And it's fun and it draws your eye because it has emoji and color therefore. But other screen flows like this one don't have to do anything. This screen flow is really just a page layout element that allowed me to pull in records or values rather from other records, maybe do some calculations, mail merge them together into something that kind of looks like a document or a report. I've placed that document on the page layout, and now users can learn a whole lot in one place about a bunch of related records. The only reason there's even a button on this page is if you had open in tabs some of those other records and you made changes, you can refresh this on the page. Otherwise, of course, it refreshes itself every time you load the page. So think about screen flows as a potential page layout element. All right, last but not least, I did say there was one not out of the box thing that I'm going to mention, third-party components, right, from the App Exchange. Here I'm showing two buttons from Apsona document generation, which is one of my favorite tools. So these are not free. You need to have Apsona and be doing DocGen, but there may be tools that you have that come with buttons. Think about where you're going to put them on the page. The other things you might do might be free. So there's tons of unofficial SF components. This I've shown several times the banners, those colored banners. Those are Lightning messaging utility from Salesforce Labs. So free and technically supported by Salesforce, even though it's not technically part of the platform, the default platform. So there's a lot of things you might be able to do on your pages with components that you might need to install from the App Exchange, even ones that are free. So all that is to say, there is a ton you can do right within the Lightning App Builder that can make your page powerful and custom for your users to help them do their job quickly, efficiently, and have some fun while they're at it. Thank you, everyone. As promised, here's that notes notes link to the resources. I'm just using my TDX24 one, but it's all still up there. And I will leave this up for a little bit with some questions, and then if people need to see pages during the questions, I will obviously go off of this screen. But thank you, everyone, and let's open up the floor. If there's any in the chat, I haven't been watching, so.
No, you're all good. It's been quiet because everybody's been going, wow.
All I can see is that I'm going to have to redesign all my page layouts.
Sorry, not sorry.
So just lots of, thanks for sharing, people loving your emojis. Oh, Joe's got a question. Go ahead,
Go
Joe.
ahead, Joe.
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, I'm Joe. Thank you for your presentation. I work for an organisation called Thomas Pocklington Trust, and we 80% of us, 70% of us are blind and partially sighted, and we support blind and partially sighted people in the UK with their education and their employment resources.
Hmm.
Um, Myself and the two other developers are all partially sighted. One of whom uses JAWS, which is a screen reader software. So he
Okay.
doesn't do anything, but he uses Salesforce all through sound. And myself and my manager both use magnification. So it's really interesting to listen to what you were saying. Um, and many of the things make sense for people that hear Salesforce rather
Yep.
than see it. And I was wondering if you know, well, a couple of things. When you go over an emoji, like like can basically I don't know if my colleagues will be able to hear that. Uh,
Yep.
we also use the double-sided equal as it's funny, it's the same thing even if you're listening rather than seeing the sense of
Sure.
balance.
Yes.
Because people won't the way that screen readers work will kind of read different levels and different things at different levels. So we use the tabs in the same way and we use headings in the same way. So I thought it was worth just kind of sharing my experience and asking if you'd had clients that have used assistive tech before, because when we design pages, we've got so many things that you've talked about to think about, but also the aspect that many of our colleagues are listening rather
Yes.
than looking at pages.
That's a great comment, and I really appreciate it. So I think I didn't say it, although it's in my notes, in the composition section. One of the reasons I both want to use standard components as much as I can, although not entirely, but also that I am happy to let Salesforce Lightning Design System do a lot of the work for me, the heavy lifting, is now it's SLDS's problem to handle a lot of the contrast and WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines compatibility. Let's let the multi-billion-dollar company handle that part. And I'm just going to assume if I'm using standard components and standard, tabs and things, that SLDS should do it right. And if they don't, by the way, you and your colleagues should file bug reports to Salesforce. I believe they have a what do you call it, SLA, that bug reports relating to accessibility have to be handled within like some very short time frame. So raise the bug and call out accessibility, and it should get fixed. They've been changing the SLDS contrast and colors to comply with WCAG, which has been updating as well. So it's a, obviously continually evolving space. But absolutely, thank you for the comments. And I will note, right, I use color, which I recognize doesn't necessarily, in a low vision environment, doesn't convey. I do try to combine color, I didn't mention it, color with other things. So when I do a banner, I also try to have the icon on it, the SLDS icons I assume should be exposed to screen readers and read out. And of course, emoji are just text. And so I believe screen readers read emoji. Of course, they read the emojis like name, um, which depending on the emoji's name may not be as helpful. But like I love putting emoji on the buttons, for example. If I have a button that is going to generate a document, I will pick, there's an emoji that's like a sheet of paper or something like that. So I'm using the emoji to draw the eye, but if your screen reader reads, sheet of paper, generate final letter, that's going to be pretty clear what it means. But absolutely, if you have, I don't have any clients currently that have low vision users that I know of. I do try to keep it in mind, but if you have low vision users, there's going to be additional considerations you should bring to the fore for sure? That's a great question.
Thanks, Michael. It is.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Michael. Somebody did ask about your related record hack, but we shared the How I Solve article, so you should be able to go away and read that. So thank you very much. I think everybody enjoyed that presentation. It was a good second time round. So thank you. I am now going to share my screen and we're going to crack on with our second part. So we're going to talk about generative AI. So everyone should now see my screen. Brilliant. Okay. So my presentation is nowhere near as fancy as Michael's. It does not have nice pictures in it or anything, but let's hope we convey some key points. So the second part of our presentation is we're just going to talk about generative AI and primarily how we use something like ChatGPT to help us either, you know, in our roles as a Salesforce admin or potentially, in a role at nonprofits. I'm going to spin through some of the less hands-on stuff. We've got slightly less time than I would have liked, so some of this may be slightly at pace, but I'm sure you'll be fine. So let's just touch on what, is generative AI. So generative AI is, a type of artificial intelligence that creates new content instead of just providing existing data. So, it's not the same as a search engine, right? That's going to show you an article that's pre-written. It's going to theoretically pump out something new written based on content it has available. And it can generate text, images, music, videos, code based on large amounts of data that it has learned. So it's learning patterns from huge amounts of data. You give it a prompt, it's like a question or a request, and it will create a response based on what it's learned. Now, the quality of that response depends, as any of you who've tried this out may have found, but that's the idea. So specifically ChatGPT is what I'm going to use in this. I'm not going to go into the whole wealth of AI, like gen tools that are out there. There's loads of them, but let's get to the good stuff. But, ChatGPT itself is a generative AI model. It's it's a large language model built using deep learning techniques. So it's designed to understand and generate human-like text-based responses based on what it receives as an input. If you have never used Gen AI and you want to use ChatGPT, I've just chucked a link in there for you. It is free initially. You can use it for free continuously. There is a payment for their next, I'm going to say version or whatever, database of terms they're using. That's a horrible word because it's not a database. But anyway, there is different models available, but we're just going to use the free version. We're not going for anything more fancy. Things we need to consider, and I'm going to say this is not extensive, but let's just think about some of the key things around security. Okay. So when we are using ChatGPT, think about things like we don't want to be putting, sensitive data in there. Don't share, private, financial, confidential data. Okay. Make sure you verify what it tells you, fact check it. There's been some interesting lawsuits appearing around AI giving wrong answers. If you're going to connect to ChatGPT or something similar using an API, think about security there. We are not going to talk about that today, but I just wanted to mention it. You need to really consider that. If you are using any AI generated code in any form, there could be security flaws in it. So don't, again, take that as gospel. Make sure you follow any compliance rules. So think about things like GDPR and use AI responsibly. Call out that you've used AI ideally. I mean, it's a bit difficult if you use it to help you generate an email, right? But if you're using it, for a blog article or for an image, I mean, I don't put in my Salesforce formulas, this was generated by ChatGPT, right? I'm not quite that far, but just, think about, what you're using it for, and when we should be clear that we've used ChatGPT or AI to generate something. So let's just spin through a couple of the items that are, use cases for AI for nonprofits. And you'll notice I put some stars by some of these things, and there's kind of reasons. So, you know, AI is great for things like summarizing meeting and call notes. That's great, right? We just talked about security. Should I really sit and have a meeting with a client and then throw all my notes into ChatGPT and let it summarize them? Probably not. However, things like Zoom, for example, now have a summary tool which can summarize your meetings for you and give you call notes. Debbie and I tested it out for the last coffee chat where we talked all about API versions. And despite the fact that that conversation went all over the place, it actually did quite a good job, to be fair. So, may not be a chat GPT thing, but it's there. But think about that, right? Don't whack all your meeting notes in there. Might be something good for things like donor and volunteer emails. But again, if I was going to thank the volunteer Debbie Nevin, I might not say, ChatGPT, please write a thank you email based on this subject to Debbie Nevin. I might say, can you write it for a volunteer? Not got a name, blah, 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 blah. One of the things that came up on the list of things is, oh, I can help format messy data. Again, I'd say messy data. Let's think about this. Are we going to give it a list of, first name, last names, phone numbers? Probably not, but might be able to help you with things like pick list values, or that are just, let's get all of the things where it says like UK, United Kingdom. Let's do all of that. So, but again, thinking about security. The idea of summarizing reports. This one again, since on my list of like, I can give you a load of data, get you to give me a summary, but again, security. I don't really like that one. But I do like grant writing assistance. Now, again, being a bit careful, do we use exact, the names of the organization? Do we give it all our personal data? But if it's something that's going to be out on your website, so if Debbie's got a whole thing on her website about Down Syndrome Association, what the organization does, and all of that stuff that's publicly available or in their annual report, say, we're probably okay there. But again, you need to make that decision internally whether that's fine. I would think that's okay because it's in the public domain. And, how can we then, maybe we get that grant, it's a publicly available document, we merge the two. Good for things like writing training guides. So please give me the step-by-step process. Maybe here's my dead Salesforce technical process, or please rewrite this process for me. And then things like it can be used for integrations. So I'm going to say chatbots, but there, we're now on the world of agents, summarizing data in Salesforce and so on. We're not going near that today. Like, let's hold that at arm's length for now. Now let's get into the stuff that we're more likely to talk about today. So let's talk about using Gen AI for Salesforce admins. So what can we use it for? So we can use it for things like writing validation rules, creating formula fields. We can use it to help design a flow. Now, again, let's not be too crazy here. Let's not I would say basic flow, yes. Something more complicated might give you ideas. Again, it's a bit like replacing Google. You think you know where you're going with this, but you're going to have to check it's right, okay? You're not going to just be able to get it to spit you out a whole flow, but it might give you a good starting point. A bit like going on Google, getting an idea, same idea. Formula entry criteria for a flow. Helping understand errors, like to chuck an error into ChatGPT and say, have you any idea what this is to do with? As a replacement for your search engine. So how do I do X in Salesforce? Maybe. Translate text speak. So this is quite a good, take that complex Salesforce process and say to it, summarize this into, I don't know, 3-sentence paragraph for me, or give me some user-friendly instructions on how to do this. Something that's standard in Salesforce, like, hey, can you give me a quick list of how somebody would, I don't know, create a new list view? Not sure what it'd spit out, but it might be worth trying it before you sit and write it out yourself. And then we're going to dive into, a bit around code. So write a SQL query. I'm going to talk about that today. Use that as maybe, I say alternative to reporting, but use it for various reasons. And you can also use it to write and understand Apex code. Now, I've again put some asterisks by these. SQL queries, depending what you put in, you probably don't need to be too concerned, especially if we're looking at standard objects, because we're doing like a report of like, please give me these accounts with this, all have the stage of this or all have a type of this. But again, depending what, you just need to be a bit careful about what you put in there. You probably don't want, if you're putting it into ChatGPT to get the SQL query, maybe I'm looking for all accounts that have the name Debbie Nevin. No, I probably wouldn't say that. I'd just say, give me a SQL query that allows me to find the name of, probably pick something dead generic like Bob Smith. And then I would replace it when I use it in Salesforce. With Apex code, depending if you're writing something dead simple, and I know we're talking about admin stuff here, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I'm hoping that you're going to take away from this some like kind of fun things that you can play about with in a dev org. Everybody heard that, right? Do not leave this meeting, go and use ChatGPT to write some Apex and run it in your production org. Okay, everyone's promising me this, but please do go play with it in a dev org because there's some really fun stuff you can do. Okay, so let's now jump into some of our examples. So these are some like here's what I created earlier kind of things, okay? So we have we have got some prompts. We've got sort of a little bit of a business case, and then we've got a prompt that we're going to throw into ChatGPT. Now, what I am going to do, oh, that's really helpful. Thank you for signing me out. Okay, one moment. I'm going to stop sharing and figure out what on earth is going on with my presentation. It's literally sign me out because that's what you just want in the middle of this, isn't it? Okay. So before I begin, who has used ChatGPT or anything similar to do any of the tasks I've just talked about? Let's see some hands. Okay, cool. Okay, let's flip it on its head then. Who's not? Okay, it's cool. Okay, right. So the first thing we're looking at here is we're going to prepare a validation rule. So and I am going to just say the org that I have created is a very basic accounts contacts with some opportunities. Okay, it's not nonprofit specific. It was going to be way too confusing to try and, well, say confusing. It wouldn't have been confusing, but I'd have had to install MPSP, make sure it was all there, all set up. And I decided that we don't need that. We can deal with just some basic data for this. So we want a validation rule that says opportunities can only be marked close won if there's a valid primary campaign source. Quite simple use case, right? We have a little prompt that basically says what we want to happen. And we are going to copy and paste that into ChatGPT. So this is ChatGPT. I'm going to post it in. Okay. That was pretty quick. So here's the validation rule. It says that we need.
Sorry,
Right,
Emma,
anybody?
zoom in a little bit so that it covers the whole screen. Thank you.
How's that?
A little bit more would be great. Fabulous, thank you.
Okay, so anybody who's a validation rule expert who thinks that'll work? It's not a trick question. I'm not I don't want to check. What do we think?
I think that will work.
I think that'll work too, Michael. I'll take that. So Okay, so what I'm kind of say here is, this is great, okay? I mean, I'm not a fake. I could say and write myself a validation rule. Michael had probably already written it in his head, but you know, to me, nice. If I then want to add to this, I can. So if I, only want certain profiles or I want to add something, it's great. But I love the fact it's just going to kick this out for me. But the fact is that I'm only going to have some idea it works if I have some Salesforce knowledge, right? So at this point, I would take this away, create it, give it a test, see what errors I get, and throw them back in. But for the sake of time, we will go and take a look at another example. So let's now look at formula creation. Same sort of principle going on here. And this, I decided in the end, this is a horrible use case, so nobody judged this, but we decided that the organization wants to look at their opportunities, and based on the value of the individual donation, we want to know whether it's a major donation, mid-level, or low level. And we've got different amounts for those, okay? And we are going to ask ChatGPT if it can write us the formula for this. Okay, so we can literally take, what our users asked for and stick it in here. So we were asking for major donation when it's over 10,000, mid-level from 5 to 999, and if not, low level. Does that look pretty good? No, Debbie's not. Debbie's not happy. Debbie, why are you not happy?
It'll be a bit confused because I can't remember hang on, sorry, I've lost the thread. What was it? So if it's, oh no, maybe I am. Sorry. Yeah,
The
maybe I
only
am.
thing
I
I don't
misunderstood.
like, the only thing I don't like about it is I would have rather it called out the. No, I said otherwise show a low level donation. So maybe I am
Mm.
okay with that. But again, there may be things you want to tweak. Um, the other thing that I quite like to add in, which I haven't done here, but adding in an explanation of what this does, especially on a complicated formula, I can actually say to ChatGPT, can you add commenting into the formula to explain what it does? So you can actually get it to just add the commenting in. I quite often ask it to do it just at the top, but it's quite, I mean, this formula is quite simple, right? But if you're writing something more complex and you really wanted to explain it, the flip side is throwing your formula in and saying, I have this formula, can you confirm what it does? If you got somebody saying, this is giving me the wrong data, like, okay, well, let me throw it into ChatGPT and let's see what that output is.
That's
Okay.
also handy if you inherit an org, isn't it? And you don't know what's going on.
Absolutely. And I've been known to do it and then throw the formula back in with commenting on it. So then I know for future, what is this? Write me a description of what the formula says so I can stick it in my description field when I create it. Another one. Anything that, these things I can do, but why not? Might as well get something to do it for me, and it's a copy paste job. Basic flow creation. So we need to track the number of contacts associated with each account to ensure that every key account has multiple points of contact in Salesforce. This will help mitigate the risk of being unable to reach an account due to a single contact's unavailability or availability, I guess. Now, to be fair, I wouldn't write a flow for this. I would do a roll up, but in my very, very basic org, I was struggling with an idea to use. So this is what we went with. So again, we've got a little prompt. We've kind of made it clear that we want a scheduled flow because we know that. We know what field we want to update, and we know that we want to run it daily. So now this is looking good. We're going to configure our flow start. We're going to set it to every day or midnight in a preferred time. We're going to get all our accounts, and then we're going to do a loop.
Well, let's just, first of all, it does a get within a loop.
It does.
And second, well, it's actually, first of all, it is not making a scheduled flow on account. It's making a scheduled flow not on a particular object and then getting the accounts, which is why it has to do a get within a loop.
Correct. So we're not going to get into this too deeply because we don't have time. But to me, this is a very good example. And I didn't know exactly what this was going to kick out, but this is a very good example of this is not great. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong, sit and argue with ChatGPT. I've had many an argument. Sit and have conversations with it of like, how do I do this? Can I figure out how to do that? But what I'd say is this is not, at least at this stage, and at least not based on ChatGPT, right? Something in Salesforce that tells you how to do it, which may eventually come or is coming, or maybe is in beta. I don't know where it's at. Might be useful, right? It's going to have more context. But equally, I would never trust that this knows exactly how to do it. But at the same time, so some people go, oh, well, ChatGPT, you can't use it. Equally, there are blog articles out there that have pretty ropey suggestions, things that are out of date, things that no longer count, So again, this is a use with caution, right? But if you're looking for something really specific, you're trying to brainstorm, I wouldn't use it to get me to write a whole flow. But it might give you some brainstorming. And I also love this about ChatGPT. Do I like this personality? I don't really know what personality is giving me here, but sure. So let's move on from our flow creation. Let's now talk about something that I absolutely love. Love a SQL query. Who here has never written a SQL query? Okay, great. I'm going to go with there's plenty of us here then that have. Fantastic. Great. Great. Fantastic. So, like a SQL query, because we can use a SQL query quickly instead of having to create a report. So this was the example I created, and we'll actually stick this one into Salesforce. So SQL queries are pretty straightforward to write. Okay, they are. However, again, I quite like to just have ChatGPT open and be like, write me a SQL query on this because it's pretty accurate with its SQL queries, to be fair. I use this a lot. So this is an example of using it for like data cleanliness, like check if there's data in these fields. How many accounts do I have? Or identify all the accounts that don't have an industry. So you can use this for things like, oh, I have a field that I don't think anybody uses. Or rather than pull a report, and we can do it that way, but let's just do a quick SQL query and see what it gives us. So I'm going to take my prompt and drop it into ChatGPT. And it looks pretty good to me. And we are then going to jump into our dev console, Salesforce. And we're going to jump into our query editor tab, drop it in here, and we are going to execute. And it has found my 4 accounts, which do not have an industry. Now, as you can see, I do not have that many accounts. Here's all 11 of them. And I do have 4 without. This may not seem the most when I've started using SQL queries probably far more in the past, I would say 6, 9 months. I love a SQL query because it's so quick. You don't have to go build a report. Now you can go further, you can find more, but I would encourage every single one of you to go play with a SQL query. You're not updating any data here. You're not going to break anything. This is one of them things you could do in production. Okay. Go and run a SQL query on your data. Go and find next time you need a report, you think you need a report for something, go do a SQL query and get ChatGPT to help you write it because it's simple. We can add more fields in and loads of stuff. It's pretty cool, right? Okay. Now let's move on to the one thing that we do not do in production, but one of the things that I really do like ChatGPT for. Do not get me wrong. Is ChatGPT going to make me a coder? No, no, it's not. But I have some knowledge of code, which is helpful. And I can use ChatGPT to write me some basic Apex, which I might use in a dev org. So I use ChatGPT to write me some basic Apex to help me clear out records that were in my dev org. So I wanted to delete all my opportunities, all my cases, my contacts, all my accounts. And I yesterday went through each one and said, hey, ChatGPT, write me a piece of anonymous Apex that will do this. And I deleted them in the exact order I would have deleted them in through a data load or whatever. But I was in a dev org, right? So if I got this wrong, no one cared. So this one that I've put in here is like, let's write a piece of basic Apex and a piece of anonymous Apex, sorry, that will update all contact email addresses in our sandbox by adding .invalid to the end of the email address. Because we don't want to accidentally send emails to people, okay? So, oh, and I'll also add that I did get ChatGPT to help me write the Apex to populate these records. So I also did it. So I would say to everybody of this, right, go away, spin up a blank org and go and say to ChatGPT something like, hey, I want to create 20 accounts, all with different names. Give me a variety of industry values, blah, 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 blah. Let it give you some Apex and run it. And then go and tell it to add contacts for them and opportunities, and you'll be amazed. I was sat going, wow, this is really cool. So let's go run this piece of code. So again, not going to do this in production, right, everybody? Oh, okay. We didn't ask it to run it. That would be the key thing, right? Let's get ChatGPT to give us our Apex. Now, I am going to trust that this is fine. I believe it is. I'm not worried because I'm in my dev org. I'm not in like a full sandbox here of any data, so I don't need to worry about that. I'm going to take this away and I'm going to pop it into my anonymous Apex and I'm going to execute it. And then I'm going to have a look at the debug log at the end. And it's told me it's updated 15 contacts with .invalid their emails. Let's see what it did. And it did it. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you should all be like, yeah, let's write code. That would be awful. And I do not want to hear about your disasters, okay? But I do think for some use cases this is pretty cool, right? I particularly like that, dropping some data into an org, create me some test records for my opportunities. Like, can you give me some Apex to do that? I literally, all these opportunities were created off me asking ChatGPT to write me some Apex. And it was a lot quicker than me creating fake data and so on and so on and so on. What I will say is I enjoyed it that much that if, maybe in a month or so, if anybody wants to do a coffee chat where we sit and do it together, like I absolutely would just because I had that much fun. So yeah, I would do that. Just like ping me, let me know, and I'd be happy to set that up. So I think I did have one more, and actually this is quite fun. Let's just do the final one. This is the kind of just life hack. Rewrite an email. So this is the like really grumpy email that I actually got ChatGPT to write. I didn't even write this myself, but I had an issue in a meeting earlier today, theoretically, and this is the email that I wrote. And it was not maybe the friendliest way that I could have put this. So we're just going to ask ChatGPT to take this. Again, look, no colleague name, no my name, no like absolute specifics. But going to take that bit out. I'm not going to read that to you, but I can agree that that's probably a little bit friendlier, right? You can get it to write all sorts of things. You can write a mean complaint letter on the back of this. So there you go. And that is the end. We're overdue for our duck race. But before I move on, does anybody have any questions, thoughts, anything they want to share? I did have a what ideas do you have? So if anybody wants to share any ideas, go for it.
Just that I've used it for troubleshooting recently. Something wasn't working, and it gave me a whole list of ideas of have you done this, have you done that, and much quicker than normally I would have Googled it and had to sort of go through several help articles and Trailblazer discussions and yeah, so that's a lot quicker.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie. I wasn't going to though manage to like follow Michael's amazing presentation. That was so mind-blowing. Martin, I think you've got a question.
If it gets it wrong, you can actually say that doesn't exist or
Oh,
well,
absolutely. Absolutely. And we kind of didn't get there, but yeah, absolutely. Like you can say to it, this is wrong. You know, one of my favorites is with formulas, is where it will give you syntax that you will immediately look at and go, that is not a Salesforce formula. Like I know that you don't use that. And you can immediately say to it, Salesforce does not use this. And then you'll get oh, I'm really sorry. You're right. And it'll give you something else. So it kind of, I use it in a very similar way as to how I would use, like, let's say the Trailblazer community boards, where you're going to get, you know, Steve Moe answers a formula, and you're going to be like, brilliant, that's the answer. But equally, there's going to be somewhere you look at something and be like, that is not quite right. Like, no. Or that's an idea. So to Debbie's point of like an error, like that's an idea, but maybe not. So yeah, you can tell it it's wrong. You will sometimes never get there. So I've spent, you know, half an hour arguing with it around a formula and just not got there. And it is fun every now and again to just go back to it and go like, it's actually this, and it will sort of go, oh, sorry. But you know, it's training the model. But there are some things that it just won't get its head around. And also ChatGPT is depend if you pay, you get the later model, but it only consumes data up to so far. So actually Flow is a really good example of something that's constantly being developed. ChatGPT is using old data. So, you know. Okay. Well, I hope everybody after this goes and writes a SOQL query. That's what I'm hoping for. You will write a SOQL query, you rebuild some Lightning pages following Michael's presentation, and you maybe go into a dev org and do something with some Apex just for fun because you can, right? Why not? And all the developers will be like, what? Just, you know, don't put it in production.